Well, I remember it well because you were living here in Lake Oswego, and it was after George Floyd's death, and the group I was in realized there was just a lot of stuff we needed to learn, and we started reading books, and there were articles in the paper and everything, and then I saw a story about you running through Lake Oswego, and just it sounded like you people were looking at you, and I thought, oh my God, we're all just people. And I really just thought, um, I just wanted to get to know a person like you, an African American, on a face to face basis. So I think I contacted the newspaper and found out your email address and contacted you, and I said, let's have coffee, and we did, and it was great because what I realized was, first of all, you were very open. I mean, I could ask you, what is it like to be an African American and go through Lake Oswego, because here, but I also found there were so many things that we enjoyed together: movies, swimming, sports, stuff like that. And I've always felt person personal relations are important, to get to know everybody. And so it started there, and we'd get together for coffee every so often. But it was a good start. Well, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago. It was called Hinsdale, and uh, the year was 1943. I was fortunate that both sets of grandparents lived within a few blocks of me. Um, Hinsdale's sort of an upscale community, but for me, it was just perfect. I could just walk the streets and walk to my grandparents, and um, just live there until I went away to college. My grandparents had a business uh, in Hinsdale that was very successful. It was a restaurant. It was actually an event kind of place. It was on 20 acres of land, and people would go there, and they'd have weddings there. So it was very successful. And they had a home in Florida and one in Colorado. And so I would travel as a kid to those homes. But yeah, in terms of moving away, it's when I went to college. So it was really the first time. I go back to my grandfather, my maternal grandfather, Charles Duncan. He never had the chance to go to college. He was very bright, self educated, and he always wanted to be an electrical engineer, but couldn't afford to do it. So he was telling me, you ought to become an electrical engineer. You ought to go to MIT. So when colleges came around, I applied to MIT, and I was fortunate to get accepted. But when I went to visit the school, I saw there were no girls there, know, and uh, and then I had uh, a, a a father of a friend in high school who was a Cornell graduate, and he invited me to an event to learn about Cornell. And after the event, they called me up and said, "Well, we'd like you to visit Cornell, and we'll pay for it." And I said, "Well, no, I'm going to MIT." They said, "That's okay." And I went to Cornell. It was beautiful, and there were girls there, And so that's where I went, and I studied. At least I started in the electrical engineering college. But what was interesting, I realized my sophomore year I really did not want to be an electrical engineer. So I went ahead and got the degree. Um, but after that, and I took every class I could outside of the engineering school. So I got a good education, but I had no vocation. So after graduating from Cornell, I went right on to business school and was fortunate to get into Stanford and went there to get a master's in business and realized it was marketing that I really enjoyed. So it was a good transition to have the engineering background and the marketing background. And Stanford was right in Silicon Valley, so I started working for high tech companies there. Yeah, let's see, I graduated from Cornell in 1965. And then graduated from Stanford in 1967. It's Cornell's in Ithaca, New York. It's It's what's called the Finger Lake region. Beautiful region. The campus is beautiful too, which is another. When I got there, that was another thing about it. It was just a beautiful setting up on a hill, looking down on the lake. Um, good, good range of schools. I mean, they had besides engineering, they had art schools and a whole bunch of stuff there, and it was co-ed. So I had cousins in California, and I saw them. I think just after I graduated from high school, which was 1961. Um, my dad worked for Allstate Insurance, and he had went on a business trip. I went with him. My cousins lived in Oakland, so I saw them. But after that, then, yeah, when I went to Stanford and Palo Alto, that was probably the second time I'd been in California. There's sort of this mystique about California, and in fact, when I decided I didn't want to go to MIT, I had also applied at Stanford for undergraduate and wasn't accepted, and I was so disappointed. I thought it would be so cool, but it worked out better. Cornell was good for undergraduate, and then going to Stanford, um, I enjoyed it. I mean, I lived in the Bay Area there for 11 years, working professionally, and until I worked at Hewlett Packard until they moved me to Oregon. In terms of the geography, I always thought it was great to grow up in the Midwest, in the Chicago area, and then go to Cornell, which had obviously a lot of students from the East Coast, a lot of Jewish kids who were really smart. I mean, I had some kids in my class that were just 16, graduated 2 years sooner than I did. And then going to the West Coast, getting that. So I had a feeling that I had an experience of the whole country, the East Coast, Midwest, and yeah, the East Coast, Midwest, and West Coast. We were talking mid 60s. So this was sort of, well, it was sort of the civil unrest, but the Summer of Love, 1968, I mean, I was there, and I became very interested in movie making. And so, sort of as you're doing, I took my camera and I went to Golden Gate Park, and that was the hippie area. Um, so I made little films around there, but the time was incredible. And yet I would also say um, it was also a very painful time in a way, because when I was at um, Cornell, President Kennedy was assassinated, and I drove to Washington D.C. for his funeral, and I took my camera, and I have slides, of the Kennedy family and the whole world leaders walking down, I guess, Pennsylvania Avenue. And then when I was at Stanford, Martin Luther King was assassinated and Robert Kennedy. And when Kennedy was assassinated, it was incredibly painful. It was like, what is going on? What is going on? These are very good people. And yet, as I'm thinking this through, that was also the time that we landed on the moon. That was so amazing. I remember sitting in our home in Los Altos, and I was married the first time then, watching this and hearing this, and it was like the whole world stopped at that moment. So there's this swing of emotions, and really good times and really painful times. I went to work for Fairchild Semiconductor, which was one of the early semiconductor companies, and in marketing, and worked there for several years. A lot of it was sort of the creative aspect of it. Um, uh, Marketing is about, what I came to learn was, when you're selling something, you you may talk rationally and make a good case, but ultimately you need to reach people's emotions, and you need to reach their heart. You need to find some motivation, and that's always appealed to me. The artistic side. That's why I enjoyed movie making. Um, so it was that aspect, and it was just very creative. I found marketing was very creative. worked at another company, Arcata Communications, a small startup, and they did not succeed. So I was out of work for about 6 months or so and was recruited into Hewlett Packard. And this was just after they had introduced the world's first scientific calculator called the HP 35. And HP was a big instrumentation company, or they sold big, expensive instruments, they sold big computers, and this pocket calculator, which was expensive at the time, it was $395, but they couldn't afford to have a sales force go out and sell this one-on-one. So they tested selling it by direct mail, and I was hired to run their direct mail program, which was amazing because I had no experience in that. But what I learned about Hewlett Packard was they were looking for, I guess, good people, and they would teach you. And so they had brought in a consultant and an advertising agency that really knew this stuff. So I started running this direct mail program, and then took over working with the sales force. And then I also started HP's first retail store program, selling through college bookstores. And it was fantastic because they gave me a lot of latitude to do this, and our division was very successful, and so successful that we outgrew the facility we were in. And at that time, that was, I'm trying to think, it was 76, I think. HP, Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard did not want to grow anymore in California. Jerry Brown was governor. They thought he was anti-business, and so they were looking for other locations. And they scouted several, and what they looked for was a place with a good engineering school, a number of other things. But so they chose Corvallis, Oregon, because of Oregon State, and they moved our whole division up to Corvallis. I'd never been to Oregon, and I liked California. I wasn't sure, but they were very generous in terms of the moving and helping you find a home. And I realized if it didn't work, I could go back to the Bay Area. I mean, HP was very good in that way. So I thought, okay, I'll do it. Came to Oregon. I had been divorced, and so I was single here, and eventually met Jan, and she's from Portland. And after that, I thought, I'm really here. Well, that's an interesting story because, as I said, I was single, and uh, oh, I actually was engaged to another woman, and she was studying nursing school in the Bay Area, and we had designed and built a home in Corvallis, and she was going to move up there. But we both realized that relationship really was not the right thing, so we ended it. And I was in this big home; it was 4,000 square feet, um, and up in this hill. And so I told my friends, I said, "Look, I'm going to put on a little marketing campaign. I'll drive anywhere in the state to have dinner with somebody you think I should meet." So I had friends introduce me to people they knew, and I don't know. I drove down to Southern Oregon and had dinner with a number of people in the Corvallis area, and a friend of mine that at HP said, "Well, there's a woman up in Portland that I'd like to introduce you to. Her name's Jan Taylor." She didn't know me. I didn't know her. But so I went up there on a blind date, and it was one of those things that when we first, she'd never been married. Had worked for the airlines for TWA, but when we first met, there was something that clicked that just told us this is something we both wanted to pursue, and so we did. I mean, I'm living in Corvallis, and she's living up in Portland. And so we had decided we were going to meet in Salem, about halfway around, and I think that was going to be like our second date, and I was really struck with this woman. In fact, after the first date, we talked on the phone a lot, and that's when we decided to meet in Salem, and so we were going to meet at this restaurant. Well, she misjudged how long it was going to take for her to get there. She was 40 minutes late, and had already had dinner with a lot of different women, and I could tell after maybe the second or third that this wasn't it. So I was really nervous because I thought, I'm going to find out. I'm going to find out this was it. So she came and she apologized, and and I realized this was it. This was it. And so we started talking and realized there was really this connection. And she said, well, unless we blow it, we're probably going to get married. And I said, I'm so glad you said that, because that's just what I was feeling. And she said, okay, now we've got that settled, how many kids should we have? And the marriage is just, well, it's a gift. It's very clear to us that we're soulmates, and the relationship has just gotten stronger. So yeah, and so we've celebrated, this is our 47th year. Yeah, right, 47 years. Yeah, well, first of all, we had our daughter Mariah.
In Corvallis?
Yeah, in Corvallis, and to sort of fill you in a little bit too, because we got married in '78, and working at Hewlett Packard was a real gift. Also, HP was one of the most enlightened companies around. It showed me how a company can be successful as a business, but also socially responsible. So I've always worked there, enjoyed working there, but I was also at a place where I thought, I want to make a more direct social contribution. Had no idea what that was at that time, and had HP's permission to find a nonprofit to do, take a sabbatical, take some time off. After 3 years, I couldn't find it. One day I woke up and said, I've just got to quit. And I did. And Jan was very supportive. At this time, our daughter Mariah was 6 months old. And took a year and a half, didn't work. We traveled to India. Mariah had her first birthday there. So it was after that, coming back, and I'm trying to figure out really what am I going to do. And I began to realize it wasn't going to happen in Corvallis. And so we moved to Portland in 1983. And I was working with a group that had a project called Beyond War. And the idea was that in the nuclear age, war just didn't make sense, So I started working with them, and was beginning to get the idea of wanting to do some nonprofit stuff, but also feeling I needed to get back into the business world. We lived in northeast part of Portland, in a rental home on Alameda Drive, and we didn't know where we were going to live. Jan grew up in there, in fact, on Alameda. So she was out looking at different places in Portland, but we looked in the suburbs too, and looked at Lake Oswego, and she found this lot here where we are now, and so looked at this and brought us down, and we bought the lot and built the home, 1984. So we've been here over 40 years. Similar, this neighborhood was just being developed. But Lake Oswego is an upscale community, so there were a lot of nice homes in the area. That was true then, true now. The lake is sort of the focus for a lot of the community. So we're on the south side of the lake, the people on the north side. But what I liked about it, it reminded me a lot of Hinsdale, where I grew up. Hinsdale had a lot of trees, and Lake Oswego did. and I had missed that. I missed that part of it. So it was very appealing from that point of view. And Lake Oswego also has good schools, and we knew we wanted that for Mariah. So we just decided this was the right place for us. I didn't know anybody here at Lake Oswego, but Jan knew people in the Portland area. So our friends were folks that she knew. And with Mariah, she went to a private school, the Waldorf School, which was in Portland. So a lot of the people we knew at that time were other parents in the Waldorf School. And that's when Jan and I really started getting active. We were very active in the school. I was on the board. We helped them with fundraising. So we got very active in that community. Mariah went there through 8th grade. We really liked the Waldorf approach. It was very focused on arts. Mariah had good drama ability. In 8th grade, they did Shakespeare's A Summer Night's Dream, and she was really outstanding in that. I realized this girl's got talent. And so we looked, first of all, to see could we create a Waldorf high school, and just didn't have the financial support in our community to do that. So Mariah went to the local high school here, Lake Ridge, just up the hill. And that turned out to be great because she got involved in drama up there. And they had the facilities that she really needed. So she was in the drama program throughout that, and did the same thing at Oregon, at University of Oregon. She was a drama minor actually down there. And it was through that, it was through Mariah that we first got connected with other people and really got us wanting to do things in the nonprofit area. Well, yeah. Even when I was at HP, I had an interest in environmental issues. Solar was an area that interested me. I interviewed for a job with the federal government when Jimmy Carter was president, where they were going to have a Northwest solar support area. I was going to do the marketing there. Carter lost the election, all that got killed, but I still had that interest in it. And so between Hewlett-Packard and it was actually left Hewlett-Packard in '82, and I was doing consulting work for small companies around here, although some larger. I did work at Tektronix and Mentor Graphics for a while. But my sense was to try to bring the best that I learned at Hewlett-Packard to these businesses. So I would sort of use Maslow's hierarchy and say, look, I understand as a business, you've got to make a profit. At HP, profit was our number one objective. But we were very clear that the reason was profit was not an end in itself. It was like being healthy. If you're not physically healthy, nothing else in life matters. Well, if you're not financially healthy, you can't do much else. But HP was, if you can make a profit, you can do other things. So when I was doing consulting, I'd say, let's get you healthy. And Maslow's hierarchy, that's at the bottom. But what would your company look like if it was self-actualized? What would you be proudest of as the owner of the company to say, this is my contribution? And in the process of that, I would get involved in environmental issues. And my turning point actually came about at a luncheon in Portland in 1995, when there was a guy named Paul Hawken who spoke. And he was an environmentalist. He was also an author. He was an entrepreneur. He started the Smith Hawken gardening stores. And he said, if all businesses put into practice the environmental practices of the very best, we will not have a sustainable society. I thought, oh my God. And I really had not heard the sustainability concept, but I quickly began to realize that. And I thought, oh my gosh, the good stuff we were doing at Hewlett-Packard, that wasn't good enough. But Paul at that luncheon went on to say, however, there's a process out of Sweden called the natural step. And it was developed by Sweden's leading cancer researcher. And it's 4 principles, and they're scientifically based. And the idea is if you follow these 4 principles, build your business around it, you will ultimately be part of a sustainable society. And he said in Sweden, they're doing that, and the businesses over there are not only moving towards true sustainability, they're making money. And I thought, oh, that's the holy grail. So I was asked to be part of a group to bring that concept to Oregon in, I guess it was 1997. And we put on a conference out at Nike and brought in community leaders. And we had 500 people attend this conference, and people said, we want to keep this going. So we created the Oregon Natural Step Network. And that's when I really began to get into the nonprofit area. And I took a 75% cut in pay, So I had to do some consulting on the side, but what I wanted to do was consult around this concept of the natural step. So I flew to Sweden with a classmate of mine from Stanford who helped create our nonprofit organization, the Oregon Natural Step Network. And we visited Scandic Hotels, McDonald's, a number of businesses to see how they were doing this. And we came back and started putting on workshops about this. And what I found was in Portland, it was the people in the building industry, the architects, the contractors, state employees that were working in the energy field, who really resonated with this natural step concept. So I formed a work group of some of those people, and it said, could we imagine what a building would look like if it fully met these system conditions? And that group worked over, I guess, about a year's period of time and looked at every aspect of how a building was built and came up with a white paper that if anybody could build this building, it would be fully sustainable. Nobody could do it at that time because the technology wasn't there, but it gave us the vision. And so some of the people there, Gertie Needland was one of them, started using those concepts. And at that time, there was a green rating system for buildings called LEED, L-E-E-D. But you could build a LEED, but you weren't going to be truly sustainable. And so Gertie Needland and other people pushed way beyond LEED towards this concept. And I started doing some consulting with some of these folks. And it really, really took off. We had, we had a world-class conference here in Portland where we brought leaders from around the world on this. And the hiccup was in 2008 when the economy went south, and the businesses we were working with could no longer pay the dues for our organization. So we merged our organization with another organization called the Living. They had something called the Living Building Challenge, which was just like the natural step. Same science. You use the same basic science, first and second thermal conditions. And so we're very comfortable merging with that organization. But I went on to start with my consulting, and what I found was it was really communities that were beginning to do this now. The businesses couldn't invest in it, so I started doing consulting with different communities and started doing that here in Lake Oswego. And what happened there was interesting because our council at that time really took to the concept. They hired a sustainability coordinator. She used these principles to envision what Lake Oswego would look like. We had a vision of how to take it forward. And we had a backlash from a small group of people, not around us, but around a concept out of Metro, where Metro was putting restrictions on some of their on their lots, where not cutting trees down within a certain area. And so our council flipped and became very conservative, and they wanted to lay off, I think, 15 people, and one of those was going to be the sustainability coordinator. And I went to some friends of mine and I said, look, what you really need here is a nonprofit organization in Lake Oswego to keep this thing going. But we've got to save this person's job. So we went to the council meeting and said, look, we can show you a way that you could save $200,000 every year that involves sustainability. In fact, what it involves is changing all your street lights to LEDs. That won't happen if you let this person go, because there'll be nobody to do it. Her job was the only one saved that year. All the other 14 people were let go. And but so I told my friends, councils come and go. If you want to keep this going, we've got to have a nonprofit here in Lake Oswego. And that's when we formed the Lake Oswego Sustainability Network. Jan and I did, and there were 3 other people. And that was 2013. And we're still going strong now. And part of that was to, first of all, make it nonpartisan. And a key value was not to demonize anybody, not to polarize our community. And our mayor was fairly conservative and was a climate denier. That was fine. I got to know him, and eventually helped bring him to the place where he was no longer a climate denier. He just wasn't so sure about some of this stuff. But the city did change the streetlights, and so they started saving money. And so we had some credibility with the mayor and other people, And the council flipped. The mayor we've got now is great. He's really on board. So we're back to where the community supports this stuff, and we built a good, strong organization. We're very financially healthy. We've got good young people working with us. And I retired in 2012 and worked full time on this. And my focus actually at that point in time was to start to focus on climate change. And I helped the city create a climate action plan. And when we did that and looked at the ways we could really make an impact, we analyzed a whole bunch of stuff. We came to the conclusion in that plan, the greatest impact Lake Oswego could have in the shortest amount of time was to start to get people to convert to electric vehicles, because they could do that, they could save money, they'd clean up the air, and everything else was good stuff to do, but it would take much longer. So I really became invested in understanding that, and 7 years ago created our first electric vehicle fair. And we've had one every year since then, and that's sort of become my passion. I mean, anytime I see somebody, I'd say, have you ever ridden in an EV before? Let me give you a ride. We bought a Tesla 6 years ago, and now Lake Oswego has more EVs per capita than any other city in the state. And it's an up-to-scale community. They can afford it. But I think our little EV fairs helped show people that this was a good investment. Well, sustainability is where you can live a lifestyle that's good not only now for you, but is good for your kids and grandkids. And that means you want to live a lifestyle where the resources that you're using can be replenished. You don't take more than you need. Life sustains itself because it keeps regenerating itself. And that means you understand that we don't live in isolation of nature. We're part of the natural system. So we need a healthy ecological system. We also need a healthy economy because, it doesn't work if people feel like they're starving. So part of that is to shift the economy to where people can have good livelihoods, um, but do it in a way where you reinvest back in the earth, so that your kids, when they grow up and their grandkids grow up, um, you you've invested in their future also. Well, there are probably a number of things. One is that I'm not alone. That what's really important, relationships with people, and also the sense that you come here to Earth um, for a purpose. And for me, a lot of my life was, uh, first of all, it was unveiling what that was, and then trying to live it. Um, and realizing when I do that, the universe takes care of you. And I don't feel unique about that. I have the feeling like everybody can be taken care of um, when they approach life out of kindness, being kind uh, to everybody, which is sort of how you and I met. You were finding that people were looking at you, and I felt that there's an element of kindness here in this universe, and I'm sure you feel it, and I feel it, and let's get to know each other, and that always works. That always works. And actually, it was a woman named Willie Poinsett who created Respond to Racism here, a black educator. When people would say, "So what should I do?" she said, "Just get out and meet people, and go meet black people, and black people meet white people or whatever, meet everybody." And I think for me, that's really key. It's key. The other, I think, is when I look back, even when I went through tough times and I was laid off in business and was divorced, or and Stanford had been my first choice for undergraduate school and I didn't get that, life always worked. It always worked. I realized the things that happened, like Cornell was a better place for me to go. And my marriage with Jan is absolutely the right marriage. And my first wife was wonderful. There was no problem with that. She was a good person. But this was the marriage that I was here to have. So I found myself thinking, um, one comes to Earth from some other realm, and what is this? Well, I think of being on Earth as a cosmic school. You come here to learn something. What is it that you're to learn? I think the lesson is unconditional love. I think it's for unconditional love for everything. I mean, for people, for planets, plants, animals, um, just for life in general. And and so I look back at 82 years, and I've been blessed. I've been blessed. Life always works, and part of that is just trusting, of letting go, and trusting that if you turn things over to the universe or whatever you want to call it, things will work, and it has. Yes, my both of my parents were Sunday school teachers. I was raised as a Christian Scientist. My dad was at a congregational church, but they both brought good values. It wasn't the religion so much; it was the way you treated people, and they both brought that. And one of the moments that sort of sticks out for me was with that is my mother always had the feeling like, just trust and things will work out. Alfred Hitchcock. I really liked his stuff. Um, uh, when I was in the 50s, when I was a kid, he filmed North by Northwest in the Chicago area. That was one of the places. And I really liked his camera techniques. And my grandfather gave me his Bolex 16 millimeter camera, which was Bolex was really first rate. So I started making 16 millimeter movies when I was in high school. And the first one I made was called Crime Pays. And I got a bunch of friends together, and I was inspired. One of the shots that I set up in that movie was from the movie Vertigo. And in Hitchcock's movie Vertigo starts with James Stewart is chasing a burglar, and he's climbing up a building, and the camera's looking straight down into the street, and then you see, actually, you see something you're not sure what it is. When the movie starts, it's like a line across, and there's a hand that grabs it, and it's a bar, and it's a bar to a letter, and then the camera's looking straight down. So when I'm making this movie, I got up on the roof of our house, and I had some friends who were supposedly chasing a burglar, and so they had set up the ladders, and it was Hitchcock's view of that shooting down that inspired me. And then they came up on the roof, and I set up my camera quite a long ways away, and you can see these small figures wrestling on the roof, and then you see one of them falling 3 stories down. Well, I put a dummy up there and had him come down,